Hallo Würzburg, wie geht's? I'm delighted to be here. Hi, my name is Sandra Cortesi. My presentation today is going to be about youth and online news. I think my original title was supposed to be How to Catch the Millennials, but I decided just very recently that this sounds too much like Pokemon Go, so I switched it to something more neutral. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. Particularly, my thanks go to Tobias Hemlinger, who kept up with my bad communication style and kept texting me and IMing me over Skype to get me here. So let's see tech. It works. In case you want to take a picture, here's all the ways of how you connect with me, particularly over Twitter. Again, why does she have a German accent? What is this? I'm originally Swiss, or my parents are Swiss, but I did grow up in Latin America, more specifically in Colombia. And now I have been living in the United States for 8 years, 7. And so in my brain, there's a big mix of languages, and particularly when talking about work, English just is way easier. So it was quite a trip to get here from Boston, but I'm delighted that it's Würzburg, and for once not Frankfurt or Berlin or Munich. So thanks for getting me here. I work at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society, which is, as you heard before, is at Harvard. I'm the director of the Youth and Media Project, which is youthandmedia.org. And I lead an initiative that Berkman Klein has with UNICEF called Digitally Connected, where we look at how young people globally use the internet and digital technologies more broadly. When I say young people, I mean young people ages usually 12 to 18, so not older than 18 usually, which classifies in the United States as middle and high school roughly. My work spans across many areas, from social media to privacy, information quality, safety, skills and digital literacy, artificial intelligence and machine learning, to augmented reality. But this presentation will focus, as I said, and the title suggests, on online news. So what's the goal for today? The Swiss in me is getting nervous because we're already running late on time. But the goal is basically the following: 4 steps or 4 sections. The first is going to be an introduction, a hypothetical/real scenario to get us in the thinking of young people and their habits online. The second one is to share with you some more about my work, particularly the work I have done in the United States, talking to young people about what they do online. The third section is then, how do we keep young people engaged, which to me is crucial here for today. And then the fourth and final section is about, why should you care? Why is this important? So let's start with the introduction. Ananda is my partner's daughter. She's 15, and she is very excited about social media, particularly has a smartphone. And I gave her the task on Friday. I said, Ananda, can you help me out? I'm going to Würzburg to speak in front of so many people to make it more relatable. Can you share with me what your first hour of the day looks like? Just the first hour. So she took some notes. So it started with Snapchat. She opens her phone early in the morning, wakes up. First thing is Snapchat, with roughly 7 notifications or snaps that were sent to her. WhatsApp, very prominently, 146 messages on that Friday, which is mostly due to the fact that she is a part of many group chats, so with a larger number of friends on it, and so that's why the high number. She is on Instagram, which is the third picture you see. She just posted a picture apparently on Thursday evening, which got her overnight 69 likes so far. She was a little bit disappointed, but said, don't worry, it will go up. She looked at the bus schedule on the fourth one, then quickly at the weather, took a shower, got dressed, ran out of the house, basically texted again some more friends that she's on time for school. On the way to the bus, she caught a few Pokemons, and on the bus which is not much, but 10 minutes ride. She read the Swiss free newspaper called 20 Minutes. She listened at the same time in parallel to Spotify, and again took a few snaps on the bus. So this is Ananda, 15-year-old girl in Switzerland. But why am I sharing this with you? So over the course of the last 5 years, I had the pleasure of conducting mostly qualitative work / mixed methods, but mostly focus group interviews with young people in the United States. I spoke with my team together to over 300 young people. And so the next few bullet points or slides are going to focus on 3 things I think we can learn from young people, and then I think they lead also over to the next presentations you're going to hear. So the first one is about young people and what do they actually think about news. So when I ask young people, what is news to you? How do you engage with news? How do you encounter news? Particularly as it relates to mobile phones, but also online more broadly. And so the first learning is that they have a different or just a much broader understanding of what news even means. What do I mean by that? So when we think about news, we as adults, / excluding some of the students in here, what our first instinct is to think about TV, newspaper, and radio. If we are creative, then we think about the same channels, but online. So how do they represent themselves online? Mostly through websites. If we are very creative today, then we think about social media platforms such as Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram. But when we asked young people in the United States what news is for them, it's just a much more diverse answer that you would get. It's much broader and it's much more nuanced. It's also much more complex. But we try to at least put it into 3 clusters. The first one, what news means to them, is what we can relate best to, is everything that is related to politics or current events. And you see at the bottom, I'm not going to read it for time purposes, but you see a few of the quotes that they mention. The second cluster of what news means to them is around breaking news. So it aligns with more the broad empirical definition of news as anything from information about current events to a friend's new relationship. And the third one, which I think digital is largely the cause, is that news is basically also related to our news feeds. And so with that, also to what our friends, for instance, post on social media, such as Facebook, where it's specifically called the news feed. So what I also want to suggest is that we shouldn't be surprised about this much broader view on what news is. If you look back in time, and here you see the latest one from the Oxford English Dictionary, news was not always associated with TV or radio, as you see here, but if you go to the same post back in time, it used to be a much wider or somewhat more open definition of what news was. From, as I said before, from current events or something that was the news. Second point is about mobile. Today, Mobile Media Day now, and about platform diversification. What do I mean with this? So here are 4 pictures in the back to contrast the past and the future. On the top right from your side, you see the US Super Bowl. Anyone knows Super Bowl? Yes, sounds familiar. So it's basically one of our biggest sports events during the year, and all the lights you see are basically people filming and taking pictures, which to me is amazing. And at the bottom right, you see a picture of teenagers before a Justin Bieber concert 3 years ago. You see the iPhones, they already look a little bit old. But if you contrast that to the same crowd many years ago, no technology basically used. And I used to show this picture with the Backstreet Boys, a crowd in front of Backstreet Boys 10 years ago. And there you saw that it was particularly video cameras and picture cameras that they used instead of mobile phones. So my people on the team said, you can't go to Germany without actually showing numbers. Sandra, you have to show numbers. So just to give you an idea, knowing that these numbers vary by country, and these are not German numbers, but in the US, about 73% have a smartphone or have access to one, which is not exactly the same. But if you look at these numbers, for instance, Switzerland, much higher. And we see in the bar on the right, basically you see that mobile phones are one of the key ways or tools of how young people go online. When I started my job, again 7 years ago, all my research was about Facebook. Some Second Life and MySpace was still in there, but it was mostly about Facebook. Then, over time, these platforms showed up, from Instagram to Snapchat, Twitter, Vine, Google+, and Tumblr. Then these tools and apps showed up, mostly instant messaging apps like WhatsApp or Viber or WeChat, that is mostly used in Asia. Then games came up where young people can actually communicate with each other and instant message each other. And then now the latest is basically these apps called our secret apps, where young people can talk to each other without the presence of adults. So when I say platform diversification, this is basically what it means. We started to not only use just one, but most of us use many in parallel. It's not that we use one and then switch to another one. We use them all at the same time. And the following basically 5 points are my assumption, or our assumption, why or what are the factors that actually impact that. The first one, it has to do with your individual preference. Or what your friends are using. So if all my friends are on Snapchat, I'm more likely to be on Snapchat as well. It has to do with the audience. So if you know all parents are on Facebook, you're more likely to maybe then go to Instagram if you want to avoid them. It has to do with the features and affordances of these apps, but that makes it super complicated because it used to be that Facebook was for the official stuff, for where my parents and teachers can see what I post. So it was everything that looked quite formal was on Facebook, and then everything creative was on Instagram, and everything silly was on Snapchat. But now these platforms have added features, so you can as well have a group discussion in a WhatsApp group, as you can have it in an Instagram group, or you can have it over Snapchat. And the fifth point is about the perceived intimacy and why this is key for what platform you actually choose. And what do I mean by that? When we ask young people, what are the things you share, you see in the back a lot of numbers. But what they tend to share the least likely, and the numbers are a little bit old, but the answer is still the same, one of the most private things to them is actually their phone number. So when you think about these social media channels, not all of them require for you to know their phone number. Some, like Facebook, you can just Google my name and I will most likely show up. I then can accept you or not. But if you want to text me over WhatsApp, you need to know my phone. So it's one way for young people to limit or narrow down the people they communicate with and make it possibly more personal. Here again, some numbers, so just that you see with regards to social media, and it doesn't include instant messaging apps, how the numbers are changing. Again, it was mostly Facebook a few years ago, and now Snapchat and Instagram are catching up rapidly, at least in the United States. And then the third point, what I think we can learn from young people, is interactivity. Many of the activities that young people really love and feel passionate about are not one-way communication avenues. So young people want to participate. It could be from instant messaging or sharing pictures that they then can remix and comment on, or YouTube videos that they can engage with, or more participatory platforms like the one we have at the bottom right called rewrites.org that we host ourselves. So, basically going back to my original title, how do we catch the millennials? I think actually I should have chosen the title, how do we catch up with the millennials? Not just how do we catch them, but how do we really engage with them? Because in the end, you don't want to have a one-way communication with them, you want them to feel more involved. So here are basically 3 recommendations I give you all. And so let's start with the first one. And what do I mean by that? The first one is about us having to shape our mindset and adapt a youth perspective. What do I mean by that? On top of having basically multiple options for channels of how you can engage with young people, I think it's increasingly also important to think about the content that you deliver to young people or that you present in order to be able to have an engagement. Here in the back, you see an example that I particularly like. That is Mic.com. It's an American example, but it's a platform, a news platform, for millennials by millennials. So not only is the content they have is more accessible to young people, and in a quite, I feel, honest way. So sometimes what is difficult for young people is that you have at the front of a, let's say, newspaper, you have all the politics, and then you have all the social fun things in the back. What they try to do is basically to merge it. It's a balance act, of course, but it's one way I see it in the US particularly well working. And what is key for me is that not only it's meant for young people, but young people are the producers of the content. Now, the second recommendation of how I think we can engage with young people is to enter actually youth spaces. Again, here 4 examples. What does it mean? If you look at the bottom left, basically, you see Snapchat. I think that's one way of a space where I think young people definitely are and that you can explore. The second one would be about YouTube, and you see a few smaller squares, how news and YouTube can relate to each other or can be linked. And the pictures you see on the left are basically screenshots from Harlem Shake. I know it's not the latest example, but I think it's a particularly good one, because something that young people started as fun actually became something that had to do with engagement, where other young people then in Egypt, in Cairo, used the same meme or the same dance to protest against the existing government. And then you see other campaigns on YouTube, for instance, the one at the top right, which is hashtagged with Like a Girl, so it shows different teenage girls that give you examples of the stereotypes we have about what like a girl means, so that's another avenue to reach them. And then what we see on the top right, obviously a youth-based Facebook, and what Facebook just decided a few days ago is actually that they are going to push more content to you, more newsworthy content, and that it's also going to allow more controversial content, which, if you think about youth spaces, is not always unproblematic. And then the fourth one, which we heard before, we're going to hear more about in the afternoon, is about WhatsApp, another space where young people are and that you can enter. And how to engage there with young people will be a theme for one of the next sessions. 2 basically points of caution. I don't know if you have ever seen this example, but I think if we enter youth spaces, we have 2 things to keep in mind. The first is about information quality. I think it's key that if we enter particularly youth spaces, that we're very considerate about them. And this is a fun example. It's not meant to be one that is depressing, but it was a hoax run by the BBC, basically April's Fool saying penguins can fly. And even if you go on Wikipedia or if you Google it, it actually says penguins can fly. As I said, this is a fun example, but if you think about the recent elections and where I come from, I think one of our key responsibilities is to also think about information quality when it comes to things like elections and, for instance, Facebook. So Facebook just admitted that it must do more to help prevent misinformation spreading over their platform, and other channels are following as well. And then we heard in the introduction also about bots. So one of the other points to keep in mind is about manipulation, particularly as we enter youth spaces and many young people are on it. How are emerging technologies being used or potentially being used to shape our minds or motivate us to act one way or another, and what's the effect on young people specifically? Now, the third point of how to engage with young people is about participation. I think it's key for all of us and all of you in here that we allow still somewhat traditional ways of participation and engagement online. You see an example, for instance, UNICEF's Voices of Youth, where young people get to blog about current issues around the world. You see Rising Voices, which is a project by Global Voices that is very similar. It involves young people as authors, as well as commentators, remixers, and sharers of events. And you see at the bottom right, basically a publication we co-produced with young people about their behaviors and attitudes online. So this is basically the traditional way. If we want to move forward engaging young people, then we should be much more open to alternative means of engagement. Again, what do I mean with that? So we start, for instance, allowing more participation on YouTube where young people can express their views, still quite traditional. But we should also be open to young people sharing their views through memes, for instance, on Minecraft, or using Snapchat filters to engage with the current political debate, or allow mainstream TV shows like The Simpsons, allow that to be merged and then remixed by young people again. Harry Potter fan fiction and the current elections was a topic. Or Scratch, which is a MIT learning how to program software where young people created games about the election. And what I think is also even more important, the more we go on, is this online-offline way of being able to engage, which is the posted example from New York you see in the middle, where young people could sympathize with arguments of peace and equality, and then others were basically taking picture of that, sharing it online, remixing, and then commenting again and reposting again. So allow basically different ways of engagement for young people, not just very traditional ones. And why should you matter? I think we are good on time, so why should you matter? Why is this actually important, and why are you here today? Again, I really appreciate it. But the basic assumption is that I think we as a society can decide what kind of society do we want to be. Do we want to be a society that is driven by peace, values such as equality, that is respecting of human rights or civil rights? And if so, I think we have to be able to change. We have to be able to come up with new... Oh, what did I do now? I exited full screen. Well, anyway, even if it's not in full screen, I think you can still see it. But basically, we have to encourage a cultural shift where young people not only receive news and information from you, but where they also can be the ones who drive it and the ones who are able to engage, as you see more on the top right. Because if you want, at some point, to have the Wonder Womans of the world that then are able to be civically engaged, potentially go and vote, create amazing projects that shape the communities. You have to start, or we have to start, as this is also my daily job, but we have to start early on. Because it doesn't come from alone, this thinking and this way of participating. We have to enable it. And so skills are actually one of the key aspects in this debate or in this conversation, which I think should be one throughout the whole day. If we think about 21st century skills, or you can call it media literacy skills, or information literacy skills, or digital skills, whatever you want to call it, I think we have to do something now. If you are an educator, ideally, please start including it into your class sooner than later, and not as individual subjects, in here a class and there a class, but throughout your curriculum. And if you are a media outlet or a media company, in an ideal scenario, you would set up an environment that enables learning, enables critical thinking, and enables creativity. Why, again? I'm going to share with you just one example, as my 28 minutes are running. But one last example, basically, which is about René Silva, a dear friend of mine from Brazil. He, to me, exemplifies the points that I shared at the beginning, at what we can learn from young people, but also how to keep them engaged. René is from Brazil, from Rio. He lives in one of the biggest favelas they have. And at age 11, he felt that journalists, to keep it broad, that journalists were not representing his community in the way he was satisfied with. It's a dangerous neighborhood. It's not easy to get in there. It's also not easy to report about it. But at age 11, he decided that he's going to start a newspaper, and quickly realized, learning how digital works and what the tools are that are available through great mentorship and also engaging his peers, he realized that online is a new space that he can use to spread the message and share his voice. And so he's now one of the most popular Twitter personalities, at least for his age. Now he's 21. And continues to really share what's going on in his communities with the goal to have a real impact and share with all of us and all of you what's really going on in his world. And to me, this is what we should try to enable as a society and as a group here, is to enable basically more people like René, more young people that feel encouraged by us and that feel that we are doing our best to find honest ways for honest engagement, and that we are moving one step towards them instead of standing still and waiting for them to come. Thank you so much.